And
We're not going to be
Eric.
recorded, but we are being recorded.
And this is Eric. I'm on the line too.
Good morning, Eric.
Morning.
Hope the shoulder's going well.
Yeah, I get out of the
All right.
sling this week. Yep. Ooh.
Excellent. All right, we have almost everybody except missing Bob, so we can convene the meeting. Bruce, do you have some announcements for the meeting?
Not really, other than the fact that this is kind of a webinar-only meeting. We have a few of us in the room here, so if you're not talking or please mute your phone, or if you'd like to mute your line on the system, *2 will do that, and then to just unmute it, hit *2. We'll leave time to make sure people can get unmuted and whatnot. So we've done this enough times to do that.
Why don't we then do introductions? I think a roll call of the board members, and then introduce anybody else that's on the line. This is Pat. I'm here.
This is Jeanette. I'm here.
Sheila Rice is here.
Johnny McCluskey.
Eric Schindler.
Amber.
And baby.
Last one was Amber, the new mother.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations, Amber.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey. All right, Bruce, who's on the phone with you?
In the room with myself is Bruce Brenstall, myself, Paula Loving, Kelly Garigula, Ginger Fancook, Stacy Collette, Todd Jackson, and Penny Cope.
All right. Well, good morning to you all. Are there any persons on the line that haven't been introduced?
Oh, this is Drew Page with QTAC.
Mina Chu with RBC.
Oh, okay. That Drew, was that you, did you say?
Yes, yep.
Okay, good. Okay, are there any comments from anyone on any public matter that's not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the agency? Okay, we can move to the first item of business, which is to approve our prior board minutes, which is the meeting of December 12, 2017.
Jeanette, move to approve. Okay, I'll second then.
Okay, who moved to approve?
Sheila.
All right, Sheila, and then Jeanette seconded. Okay, are there any changes or additions to the minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes of December 12, 2017, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, the minutes are approved. We can move on to the second item of business, which is the Montana Board of Housing Credit Program 2019 Qualified Allocation Plan.
So, Pat, Mary's on a plane to Washington, D.C. right now for a tax credit meeting and conference, so you will have myself today walking through the allocation plan. Penny is going to turn the presentation of our webinar over to Greg Gould, who will drive kind of our walkthrough of the allocation plan. And as we do that, he will make any proposed changes to the plan that you as board or as a member would like to see kind of go out for public comment. As I mentioned before, and as is included in the memo for this section, we won't actually be taking a vote on the plan as it goes out because we're not really required to. If you remember last year, we actually put the plan out, the staff just put the plan out for public comment. We had a meeting scheduled, but we couldn't get a quorum. So we kind of figured out we didn't really need to put it out. We'll need to vote, though, to approve it once we receive public comment and to move forward. So I think in the realm of how it worked last year, and it worked quite well, We did take comments from board members. We included any of those comments in the plan as it went out for comment. And so I think we'd like to handle it that way. So this part of the meeting, we won't really have a kind of an approval, an amendment to the plan or anything. We're just going to have kind of discussion and comment and additions or deletions as you guys ask for. And we'll put that out for public comment right after the meeting. So any questions on that? All right. Well, I think that's fairly clear. I would say that anyone, including board members, can type into their webinar questions or comments that they might want, or probably more likely just interrupt me, and we can have discussion or comment as we walk through the plan. So, Greg, are you ready to roll?
Sam, do you see the QAP up on the screen now?
I do.
Yes.
Good. I'm ready.
If anyone can't, please let us know. So I'll just kind of talk as he scrolls through here. A lot of these are just table of content changes, not really any material things. The first sections are just changing dates. So again, just updating the plan. Most of the issues that we'll have comments on the side where we'll have any discussion at all. So as we walk through the definitions part, first, I don't think we have a comment over there, but the first one is we're removing the adjusted construction costs. That was used in the calculation of general requirements, and we're just going to use the construction costs as we use for all of our other fee limitations. It really doesn't make a material effect on that calculation, and it simplifies that calculation. Looks like my comments got taken out. Oh, there's some in here.
Bruce, do you want to discuss the amendment to the 10% cost certification definition?
I will. As soon as I find it, Greg, I'll certainly talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah, for whatever reason, this one didn't have it. Okay, so I'll have to use this. So the 10% cost certification language that we have there, we're really kind of making some changes to clarify that the third-party CPA audit report, that we had some language in there that referred to a certification that isn't appropriate for a CPA standards. So what we're doing is we're just making a reference to the CPA audit report, which includes some other things, including the statement of the owner and whatnot. So that, and some of this we'll talk about it later too, but it comes across as recommended practices to try to just meet industry standards. All right. I think most of these are going to be fairly simple. What was our next one here, Greg? We're talking about the uniform application and adding language to cover when we move into our funding app portal. So I think that's all fairly.
I think this revision construction cost is just to align the reference to the Uni app with the actual title of that section of the Uni app.
Yeah.
In the final cost certification, again, we're revising that language to refer to the third-party CPA audit report rather than cost certification to go along with that change Bruce discussed.
Yes.
The definition of hard cost is next, Bruce.
Yeah, definite, hard costs again, can't read the comments, but, we basically tried to simplify this definition, and, through some of our definitions, we started like excluding things rather than what was included in the hard cost definition, so we kind of clarified that and just tried to simplify it. So again, no major change, more of a clarification.
We've added a definition of permanent supportive housing, which goes along with the addition of one of targeted permanent support housing for the targeting area of the scoring criteria. So you could get points for targeting or providing for permanent supportive housing.
Okay. Next.
And we have our soft cost and soft cost to hard cost ratio definitions, which Bruce, I think, go together with the hard cost definition revision to simplify.
Yep.
And also clarifying the land value.
Right, and I think the thing that we had here was we needed to make sure that we included that land value even in projects where it was donated or if there was a long-term lease in the denominator of that calculation, so it didn't skew projects that had significant donation and or leased properties. A lot of times those tended to be like the tribal or reservation projects. And of course, these changes will all have to flow into the uniform application too. All right. EAP, again, we're clarifying that we may have another form of application here at some point. All right. So section 2, we ended up deleting out actually most of this. This section was kind of a very generic just description of housing credits. All of this stuff can be found out on numerous websites with many different explanations. So we made a reference to that, and then we deleted the whole section 2 for most of its entirety. And these are actually recommendations to do this from other professionals in the field. They say to not repeat all that stuff if you don't need to. So we're getting under Montana-specific requirements. The first section we come to is under developer fees. As part of the discussion down in Fairmont, when we got there, we had really good discussion in this area. One of the comments that we had was on bond projects, because these projects are not using part of our competitive credits. There was a comment that some states have gone to allowing a higher developer fee for 4% bond deals. And the rationale behind that is, you are able to increase your developer fee, which actually increases your qualified basis, which increases the amount of credit you're eligible for. In return, those states have basically said, but they need to put that money back in as a deferred developer fee. But it helps the project in the fact that they can get more credits into the deal. you know, we kind of thought about that one. We went back and looked at the recommended practices from NCSHA, and it does not address the fact that, you know, the states should be allowing over and above the 15%. I think that is something we can continue to think about and look at, but at this point, staff does not recommend increasing that developer fee above 15%. If we look at the projects we've had even just this year and in recent years, most projects don't even come up to the max developer fee. And then the only other comment is just on the definition, I guess, or what we include. Again, we're simplifying that calculation. So under next one, any comments, please chime in. Absolutely. Limitation on soft costs. We did have some good conversation around this. We had some comments that actually we were including in our soft cost calculation interim construction fees. Those can vary significantly depending upon when housing equity comes into the deal, meaning if your project has your credits coming in at a much later date, which a lot do, you can have higher interim costs through construction interest because you have to have your construction loan out a lot longer. So that can, you know, kind of put a drag on your soft cost totals and your percentages. Well, we kind of proposed to rectify that is rather than complicating the calculation, increasing those maximums up by 2%, which for the most part absorb any irregularities there and just make it a much simpler calculation. So we proposed raising it up to from 30 to 32 and from 35 to 37. And then we also said that for this one, for projects that have 4% and 9% credits, or they're combined projects, we realize that they're separate legally and they have to be. But a lot of times when they're doing these, they sometimes end up putting some more of their soft costs on one side of the deal than the other. So not averting the limit, but just saying, let's look at the projects on a combined total when we compare our soft costs, and we included that language. So I think that one, you know, I don't think there's anything too major there. If we got any comments from board members, we'd sure take those. And if you guys are thinking about these and you want to jump back, please let us know. We'd be happy to do that. Under professional fees, this is a new section. It was included kind of generally above, but we decided to put it separate. A lot of states and NCSHA recommends that we look at professional fees, whether they be architectural, engineering, accounting, whatever they might be. And some states actually put limits on that. We're not at that point. We just want to officially begin to start looking at them and comparing them and basically seeing what we find out. So that's what this is about. It's just starting that discussion. Down to number 4, under underwriting assumptions. We're talking about a total expense ratio here. We talked about this a little this year. NCSHA is recommending that states look at this, especially with projects that have no debt, because the debt coverage ratio calculation doesn't work with those projects. We found also that the projects with very small debt affects their debt coverage ratios greatly. And just looking at basically what the total income is compared to the total expenses gives you a good basis of, you know, is the project, you know, throwing off excess cash that may be just going straight to the owners, or is it within reason? 110 rate is kind of a benchmark target, so we just said we're going to take a look at it for consistency and not put a hard limit in, but actually just do some work looking at it. Doesn't mean that in the future years we may not put a limit in, but at this point, I think we don't want to go that far. All right, operating reserves. Oh, I think that's just a numbering thing. Under project accessibility, am I getting too far ahead, Craig?
I didn't know if you want to comment on that change under utility allowances, to go to the HUD.
Oh, that, I think that was more of a, kind of a clarification, so.
Okay.
On some of these, if I do skip over them, they're really kind of just a clarification, it's not a change, really. Project accessibility, during our sessions, I think we had some comments about putting in, saying that the no-step entry does not apply to, if there's no living space on the ground floor. We decided we probably should take a look at this issue a little bit more before we started adding that language, so we took that out. I know we didn't take it out. We put it in during the session in Fairmont, and then we decided to not put it in. Whatever that means. Okay. I think the next one that I have, at least, is under accountant and owner certification. Again, I think there's a couple of minor changes, but they're more minor. So, again, this one is change the language to audit report based on the NCSHA. The one thing, though, that we are going to do, rather than including the requirements for the audit report in this section, is we refer to it as one of the forms, and then we can go ahead and make sure that all of those requirements are included in the form. And again, we'll change the certification language throughout the QEP. Okay, so I think the next one, and we'll talk about this again like below, we are going to move all of the fees out of the allocation plan itself and put it in one of the forms as a schedule. And I think it'll be a lot clearer for folks. They won't have to go trying to pick through the allocation plan to figure out all the fees. They'll be right all together in a schedule. They will be approved by the board, so that fee schedule. So,
Bruce, this is Pat. This is Pat, and this is kind of a nit. But I noticed the term fee schedule form was used throughout, and the form to me suggests something that the applicant has to fill out, and really it seems redundant to say schedule form. So isn't it just more accurate to say the fee schedule?
Yeah, we kind of talked about that internally, and we talked about whether or not to start, because all of our attachments were called forms, so we were trying to stay the same. It is a little bit confusing, so we'll work with.
Like I said, it was a nit. Like I said, it's a nit. It just seemed redundant. Okay.
Yeah, I hear you. So we'll work with Greg and Nick to make sure we're kind of on the same page there. Down in under the first award round, we are proposing to have the letter of intent submission date be Tuesday, May 14th. With those presentations coming to the board on June 4th. Typically, it's a face-to-face meeting here in Helena. The application submission date for those that you invite forward would be Monday, August 27th. And the award determination would again stay in November at our November board meeting. Kind of with this, we had good discussion. We moved the date back, allowing for an additional week for full applications and an additional week for staff to review. So it seemed like a pretty good middle ground. And under board consideration, this is where we just added some language to clarify at the board meeting what you guys consider public comment versus what is part of their presentation. And just put folks on notice that, you know, the chair will be monitoring those presentations for, in public comment for appropriateness and whatnot, so. The next paragraph was just a comment that had been made at the workshop in Fairmont, and it was really something to go back many years, several years ago at least, when the staff brought the housing credit applications to the board, in this sense, letters of intent too. Actually, the staff made a recommendation on projects that should be funded. We moved away from that a little bit in the fact that we don't really bring recommendations anymore, but we just bring information that's presented to the board. And there was some comment made that maybe we wanted to go back and provide a little more input from staff, and maybe not a recommendation, but just have staff play a greater role in that. So this isn't really something that goes in the allocation plan, so I don't know that we need to talk about it here, but even during our training and our strategic planning, we can talk about, does the board wish staff to have to present this any differently? And then also one of the comments we had was just during the consideration process and the invitation process to purposely put in pauses in that process so board members have a time to absorb and think about what they're doing and make any changes they may want to make along the way. I think we actually did pretty good this year. We'll again talk about that. It's more process driven than actually allocation plan stuff, but folks just wanted that comment made to you guys. All right. Some of the other deletions out of here, I think, are just more clarifications. There's several on page 25. And then I think the next major change we get to is the fee section, Greg. Again, I talked about this briefly before. We've taken out a lot of the language out of this section and other sections that refer to specific fees and put them in the schedule. And I actually think this will be a lot simpler for folks to have it in the schedule. So as we move down through 27, this is where we're basically taking all those fees out and that language out and putting it in the schedule. We walk through section 7. Set-asides, I don't see any major changes. Section 7 so far. Okay, so the next major one is part C, incomplete Under letter of intent and application process. Yeah. So we've talked about this with you guys a little bit, I think, but this is a new process that we are proposing for you guys to think about. And what we've done in the past is we've kind of had these threshold items for the letter of intent and application, and if projects don't meet them, we end up basically putting the project back. We've had the board having to consider projects, to make exceptions for them. And really, a lot of times they were kind of very minor oversights and things that could be corrected quite simply. So rather than doing that, we proposed at the workshop to actually just say, all right, we still want you guys to make a good attempt at getting these in right the first time. But we realize accidents happen. And if there is any item that is omitted and or just needs major corrections, that we'll go ahead and let you make those changes, but we will charge you a fee for that. And so for each threshold item that needs any corrections, additions, or whatever, we'll charge them $1,000 for each item. So theoretically, they could, run up quite a bill if they don't do their job up front. So we actually got good reception to this at the workshops. Applicants said, yeah, we're supposed to do our job, but if we make a mistake, at least this is a workable option for us. All right. So that's a brand new thing, and I kind of look forward to that. I think it'll actually work out well. Now we're into the letter of intent. We just added to include with that a preliminary title search. Basically, that gives us legal description under our threshold requirements. It's under our threshold requirements. And we talked about this again in Fairmont. No one had a problem with it. We added it into not only our letter of intent, but we added into the application thresholds. Further down under number 11, clarifies the information needed for the utility service. We'd had some information be included on projects that wasn't really from the utility companies, so that makes clarification.
Bruce, this is Sheila. I'm on page 31, number 7, and
Yep.
There's a point about the market studies don't seem to always work or include tax credit projects. I'm not on the webinar. I'm just on the form that was in the packet online.
Yeah, and I think I'm not sure why that got included online, but that's fine. We did have some discussion. It was probably more of the training with the developers to say, when you do your market studies, and we run into this before, where the analyst does not include the existing credit projects, and we've had to go back and make clarifications for that. So we were trying to emphasize that to developers that they need to make sure that's happening.
Okay, I understand. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Good question, Sheila. You're keeping me on my toes. That's good. So as we kind of go down through this, we clarified on page 33 under number 15 that the capital needs assessment, can't be more than 1 year old, and needs an update if it's not within 6 months. Those things do change quite quickly. page 34. Again, the rest of that was all clarification type issues, no real major policy stuff. So. Greg, if we're going through here and you notice something I'm missing that actually is, just let me know.
I will, thank you.
So I think we're at development scoring. Is that right, Greg?
Let's see, yeah, I'm down in 9A. These are kind of clarification more than substantive.
Yeah. I really didn't want to spend any time on clarification ones.
That's a clarification. I'm down to where we've revised the point totals to correspond to some changes.
So we did make some revisions. You can see that there, at least on the point totals, it wasn't major. But our approach to our scoring this year is we were finding that staff and especially the developers were spending a lot of time jumping through a lot of hoops to get points that, you know, were important, but probably not at this stage that they were that. But we couldn't at least do this a lot in a lot more simple manner. So we tried to clean up the math a little bit, and we tried to make these scoring areas a lot easier to kind of understand and meet. So that's where the points and the thresholds were adjusted slightly, but not materially, I don't think. But let's just step through each one of the scoring sections and talk about the changes we made. In the first one, extended low-income use, it is required by federal law that we have this in our plan in some form. That's what that little star is next to the number 1. And what we did here was we just said, if you are going to commit to this project to basically the 46 years, you'll get the 100 points, and if you're not, you will not get it. It does take into effect the eventual home ownership. So that's what we proposed there. And in reality, every project we have commits to 46 plus years. So we're just going to clean that up. Lower income tenants, this is kind of the targeting section. Really the only thing we changed here was we adjusted the 61 to 100% at 50 to 180 points, which means you can only get 200 points total in this section rather than 220. And it was really just a math cleanup thing. So that simplified that. Under project location, it kind of became a significant game trying to figure out the location of the project to a lot of these different things. So what we did was we said, you know, if the project is within, how does that work? It's within 1.5 miles of a grocery store, or...
Is it just me, or is Bruce cutting in and out?
Oh, am I cutting in? Sorry.
No. Your line is cutting in and out. Was it just my phone, or is there other people having the same problem?
Yeah, it was happening on mine as well.
Okay.
Okay,
Just
I'll
to let
try
you know, Bruce.
I might be talking away from the phone a little.
Okay.
So really kind of what we did here, rather than kind of having to do this list and go back and look at it, what we said was, if you're within reasonable distance or you have access through transportation to a grocery store or a medical services, you will get these 100 points. Does that help that I'm talking better into the phone?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, it does.
Okay. So we really did kind of clean this up. I think we took out some of the question we had about, you know, especially in projects that are more rural, you know, how do you come up with this laundry list of your project being close? And we thought, you know, really the two core things that projects really need to be nearby would either be a grocery store where you could get groceries and or some sort of medical services, and so we allowed folks to get their points that way. All right. Under housing characteristics, we lowered the number of points down to 100, and then we tried to simplify within each of these sections. For instance, you would get 30 points. I need a little help. Basically, you get the 30 points if you had at least one of the following community input requirements. So we tried to simplify how we're able to reach out and include their communities in the project. Under appropriate size, we lowered the points down to 35. You know, all of the requirements.
Bruce, you're cutting in and out again.
Sorry. I wonder what's wrong with my phone.
I hope they're. You know, Bruce, I'm not sure it's your phone. I think somebody might be rattling some papers or something, and that's what's cutting you out.
Okay.
So if everybody else goes to mute and the people in the room are quiet, I think you'll be okay.
All right. So, folks, if you put your phone on mute, I unhooked my speakers, so if anyone here needs to talk, come over and talk over my shoulder. And hopefully that will help. Appropriate size, we took it down to 35. Essentially, it stays the same. Market needs, we went down to 35 points there also. But you have to meet all of the four requirements? 3 requirements on vacancy rate, absorption rate, and rents in order to get those points. So that's what we did differently there. Under project characteristics, we went from 230 down to 200. You get 100 points for any one of the following items. Affordable housing stock, meaning that either the preservation of existing affordable housing or an increase in affordable housing stock through the source of funding, or it's in a qualified census tract or local community development revitalization plan, or it's a historic preservation project. Or the project has project-based rental subsidy. So, as you guys just a reminder that as we did go through these, we went through them in specific at our workshop, and developers kind of understood what we were doing and were comfortable with these changes. So. And that also includes the green building. 100 points for that section too. As we get to developer team characteristics, basically we brought this up to 400 points possible, and we said that they needed to meet all of the different sections of that development team experience, management education, cold weather development. To get those points. We did talk a lot under the next section, participation of a local entity. We had situations, and we do have situations, the developer, or at least the developer partner, local organization that's providing a lot of these services already. So we made it, I think, a lot more doable and a lot more easier to handle, especially with those projects. And then we split into two kind of sections where we talked about the outreach and including local entities in your project, in your development, but then also we also talk about the services or commitments that were being provided to your tenants. So you get 30 points for each section now for a total of 60 if you meet those requirements. All right. So under 8, tenant populations with special housing needs. This is where we added the definition above that talked about permanent supportive housing. There's a big push to provide permanent supportive housing, especially to meet our homeless needs in the state. So we recognized that need and added a number F in here that would be considered for these points. And then, as we move into developer knowledge and responsiveness, I believe that all kind of stayed the same. Demonstrated poor track record the same. How we assign negative points. We didn't really make any changes there. And then finally, when we get to the minimum scoring, because of the changes we made in point totals, our actual total points available right now are at 1,000 rather than 1,100, and we moved our threshold from 850 down to 800. Oh, wait a minute, sorry, I read that wrong. So our total points available are what? Greg, can you remind me? Is it 1,200? 1,260.
1,260 for a competitive and 1,000 for a 4%. No, I'm sorry, 1,200.
We have 1,260 total.
So the threshold is 1,000 for a competitive project and 800.
800. Yeah.
Yep.
For a non. So I think the kind of the ratios and everything stayed fairly close. You know, our totals didn't change hugely. The total possible went from 1,290 down to 1,260. So I think we essentially stayed the same, but the numbers changed a little. The only real change we made in your additional selection factors was there was some talk about recognizing projects that actually were able to target lower incomes at 30% or less. Right now, our scoring only recognizes 40% or less, so we just added this language to recognize that fact. Most of the changes on the next page have to do with the fees being moved. And the next real significant change that staff is proposing, actually on page 49 under carryover commitment, was right now when we have exceptions that need to be made to that 10% requirement, we bring them to the board for consideration. And we're basically proposing that you allow us as staff to allow those extensions. And of course, if for some reason we don't feel comfortable doing that, we will bring that request to you as the board if need be. That is a little bit of a change in policy, so if any of the board members have comments on that, we'd sure be willing to listen. Under 10% tests, again, we're kind of dealing with that whole audit report stuff. Clarification stuff so far. Greg, you can go through, stop me, but I'm not coming up. The one thing I will note for you guys under like the compliance fees, and last year's plan you actually had the staff being able to change those fees as needed. We've kind of took a look at all of the fees that we have right now. We've moved them to that schedule, and they're part of a schedule rather than an allocation plan, but any changes to those fees need to be done by the board at one of your monthly meetings. I think that actually makes a lot of sense. So you're in that process. Education requirements, basically a clarification that they need to meet those requirements within 6 months. Okay. That's the last change that I have on my list. I know in your board packet you did have a schedule of the application standard fee, late fees, and compliance fees. So you can go ahead and take a look at those. Yeah, great. So I guess this is the time that we can, if there's any areas of the plan that board members have been thinking about, that they'd like to see any other changes made that we maybe didn't talk about here. Any of
board
Bruce,
members, anybody have any? Anybody have any
Sheila,
comments or
and
suggestions? But
this is Sheila. I don't have a change to the plan, but I would like to add to our longer meeting, I think we have a longer meeting in February, that discussion of the process in terms of, do we ask for staff recommendations, those kinds of things. I think that would be, it just would be good to have a discussion of that outside a allocation process, and I think that meeting in February would be a good place to have it.
Good comment, Sheila. We will definitely do that.
any other board members have comments or suggestions on the QAP?
Just as you think about that, I'll talk really quickly about our process. We have worked with Greg and we've worked with Commerce Legal. We will be putting this up on the website right after this meeting. It will be available for public comment. And Penny, you're going to have to help me on this, but we're having our kind of public hearing on January 20, I believe it was something like January 25th or the week of that week. No, I don't believe that's right. I believe we're taking our final comments on January 26th written, but I think we're having our public hearing by webinar on the 23rd. And if I'm a little off on that, whatever. But we will be bringing the plan with any comments back to you at our February meeting, which is our February 13th meeting in Billings. And we will be, our training that Monday in Billings. So we'll be able to, go over some of this stuff and do some training, especially on procedures and stuff.
Bruce, I can't access it, but if you go to our website and go to public comment opportunity.
Yeah,
and
so
we'll have all of that posted there.
we'll have it all posted on our website so you can verify that if you're interested. So that's what our process will be, and I'll turn it back to Pat for any additional comments or questions.
Okay, as Bruce had indicated earlier, we're not going to take a vote on this. The staff is going to go ahead and put it out for public comment. So we'll have one more opportunity for board members at this point to offer comments or suggested changes. So any board member out there have any comments or suggested changes? Let's have them now.
This is Sheila, and I don't have a change, but I do want to comment that I was able to sit in on part of the QAP. And I don't know if it's unique to Montana or not, but basically the developer community was there in force. And I think what makes our QAP strong is that we really do take developer comments seriously. They don't always get everything they want, but it makes it a better process if we listen to them and what works and what doesn't work. And that means that we get better and more housing.
Thank you, Sheila, and thank you for taking the time for attending that. I know Bob wanted to attend that. Was he there as well?
Hey, Pat,
I was there on
Bob didn't make it, but he hurt his foot or something. So he really tried to, but he just couldn't.
All right, well, I don't hear any more comments or suggestions from board members, Bruce, so it seems like staff's good to go to put this out for comment.
Thanks, you guys, and we appreciate your time going through it.
Okay, do you, staff have any other items of business for the board meeting?
Oh, I believe we are fine here.
Okay, any board members have anything they want to bring up at this point? All right, well then I'm going to go out and enjoy the 75-degree weather down here.
What else is
Rub
new,
it in.
Pat? Rub it in, rub it in.
It is going to be down to 6. It is going to be down to 65 by Thursday, Bo. So I just wanted you to know that.
Oh no.
So Pat, this is Eric.
Yes.
Eric. I'm off, and I had shoulder surgery, as you know. I'm off next to physical therapy, the pit of misery, dilly dilly. So everybody have a good
Dilly dilly, Eric.
dilly dilly.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. If there's no more business, we can adjourn the meeting.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Appreciate
everybody.
it. February.
See you in
Thank you very
Billings.
much.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.